Hello, my name is Alina, and I've been a flight attendant for almost 4 years now. People think my job is glamorous, flying across countries, meeting new faces, and staying in luxury hotels. But the truth is, after weeks in the air, you start craving the one thing money can't buy: peace. That's all I wanted when I returned home after 2 long months of nonstop flights. Just quiet, familiar walls, and a proper night's sleep in my own bed. When I dragged my suitcase through the front door, the house didn't feel like it used to. It smelled faintly of cigarette smoke, even though no one in the house ever smoked before. The lights were dim, and there was an odd hum coming from somewhere, maybe the air conditioner. My stepbrother, Rayan, was sitting on the couch, headphones in, staring at his laptop like he hadn't moved in hours. He looked up at me briefly, smiled without warmth, and said, "Didn't know you were coming today." I brushed it off. He'd always been a bit distant. Not rude, just hard to read. We weren't close, but he used to at least ask about my travels. This time, he didn't. His eyes darted back to the screen quickly, as if he couldn't wait to end the conversation. I told him I'd landed earlier than expected and would crash after a shower. He nodded, barely listening. Upstairs, everything looked the same, but something about the silence unsettled me. I had left my room tidy before I flew out in August, but the curtains were drawn differently, and a faint layer of dust sat on my nightstand. Someone had been in here, I could feel it. My stepbrother's room was next to mine, door locked, but the faint sound of typing bled through the wall. Fast, impatient typing, followed by what sounded like a muffled voice on a call. I ignored it for the night. Jet lag hit me like a wall, and I collapsed into bed. I woke up at 2:17 a.m. to footsteps, slow, creaking ones. They came from the hallway, paused outside my room, and then moved downstairs. I waited, heart racing, listening for a door or the fridge opening, but nothing came, just silence again. The next morning, the smell of coffee pulled me to the kitchen. Ryan was there, looking exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. He jumped when I greeted him. His laptop was open on the counter, but he quickly shut it when I came closer. "Working on something?" I asked lightly. "Just freelance stuff," he said. His tone was clipped. That afternoon, while unpacking, I noticed one of my drawers was half open. Inside, a small flash drive that wasn't mine sat wedged under my clothes. It was black, no labels. My first instinct was that Ryan might have used my room while I was away, maybe by mistake, but something about that drive didn't sit right. I took it to my room, plugged it into my laptop, and waited. Nothing showed up at first. The folder was hidden. When I revealed it, there were video files, but they wouldn't open. The file names were random strings of letters and numbers. I removed the drive, heart thudding. That night, I asked Rayan directly, "Did you leave something in my room?" He looked confused, or pretended to. "No, why?" I mentioned the drive, and he shrugged, saying, "Probably yours. You travel with all kinds of tech." His tone was dismissive, almost mocking, but his hands, they were shaking. Over the next few days, his behavior grew stranger. He would disappear at night, coming home just before dawn. Sometimes I'd hear the back door open quietly around 3 or 4 a.m. When I asked him what he was doing, he said he was meeting friends or working on projects. The word projects became his favorite excuse. One evening, I returned from grocery shopping to find the house lights off, but the faint glow of his laptop screen visible from the hallway. He didn't hear me come in. I saw his face lit by the monitor, focused and pale, and the reflection of an image on his screen, a man's passport photo, zoomed in. He noticed me seconds later and slammed the laptop shut. "What are you doing?" I asked quietly. He stood up too quickly, almost knocking the chair over. "You shouldn't sneak up on people like that," he said, his voice tight. I apologized, pretending to laugh it off, but he was visibly rattled. That night, he didn't come home at all. By the end of the week, the house didn't feel like home anymore. Every corner held a quiet sense of being watched. I started locking my bedroom door. My friends from the crew messaged, asking when I'd be back on duty, but I told them I needed a break. I didn't explain why, not yet. On Sunday morning, while he was still asleep, I finally gave in to curiosity and checked his room. I knew it was wrong, but the anxiety had grown unbearable. His room smelled like damp clothes and something chemical, cleaning fluid maybe. There were boxes stacked by the window, sealed with duct tape, and his desk was littered with receipts, papers, and half-empty energy drinks. What caught my eye was a photograph tucked under his keyboard, A group of passengers boarding a plane. I recognized the airline instantly, mine. And the date stamped on the back matched a flight I'd worked in September. One of the passengers in the photo was circled in red ink. That's when I felt it. That cold, heavy certainty that this wasn't just odd behavior. Rayan was involved in something dangerous. I slipped out of his room, tried not to make a sound, and went straight to my own, locking the door behind me. My hands were trembling as I texted my friend Zara, another flight attendant. Can you check flight manifest 7A3 from SEP 22? Need to confirm a passenger name. She called me immediately. Alina, that flight's been in the news. One of the passengers went missing a week after landing. I didn't tell her about the photo or the drive. Not yet. But in that moment, my exhaustion vanished, replaced by a creeping dread. Whatever my stepbrother was doing, it was linked to something bigger than I could have imagined, and it had started on one of my flights. When Rayan came home that night, he was unusually calm. Too calm. He asked if I'd gone through his things. I lied. He smiled faintly, like he already knew the answer. Then he said, "You should probably go back to work soon, Alina. You're not safe here when you ask too many questions." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just living with a secretive brother, I was living with someone dangerous. And I didn't know how much he knew about what I'd seen. After that night, sleep became impossible. Every sound made me jump, the wind brushing against the window, the creak of the stairs, even the soft hum of the fridge downstairs. My mind replayed Rayan's words again and again. You're not safe here when you ask too many questions. I started noticing little things. The curtains in the hallway were always closed, even during the day. The basement door, which had always stayed unlocked before, now had a new padlock. And there were deliveries, unmarked packages arriving every other evening, which Rayan collected before I could even see who dropped them off. I told myself not to get involved. I told myself to pack my bags, return to duty, and forget about it. But fear does strange things. It makes you curious when you should run, and bold when you should stay quiet. A week later, I decided to find out what he was hiding. It started with a sound, faint but distinct, coming from below the living room floor. A mechanical whirring, like a fan or some kind of ventilation system. It wasn't constant. It came and went at odd hours, mostly around midnight. I waited until Saturday night when Rayan left, claiming he was meeting friends. I watched his car pull away before slipping downstairs. The basement door was as usual locked. I tried the handle anyway. No luck. So I did something I'd never imagined doing in my own house. I picked the lock, not skillfully. I just used a bobby pin and some stubbornness. It took me 20 minutes, my hands shaking the entire time, but finally, the latch gave way. The smell hit me first. Damp concrete mixed with something sharp, chemical, like bleach. The single light bulb flickered weakly when I turned it on, revealing an unfinished basement, boxes stacked high, a dusty old sofa, and in the far corner, a black curtain that looked wildly out of place. I walked closer, the floorboards groaning under my weight. Behind the curtain was a false wall, plywood, screwed into the concrete frame. My pulse spiked. Someone had built this recently. I looked around and found a screwdriver lying on a shelf. I hesitated only a second before unscrewing the panel, one piece at a time. When the last one came loose, a gust of stale, cold air drifted out, and I saw what was hidden behind. A small room, barely big enough for a single bed and a desk, lined with soundproof foam, the kind musicians use or people who don't want to be overheard. On the desk sat a second laptop, 2 external hard drives, and a camera tripod. The walls had photos taped to them, blurry images of people, taken from a distance. One of them stopped me cold. It was a picture of me, taken from the street outside our house. My vision blurred for a second. I felt my knees weaken, my stomach twist. There were timestamps on some of the photos, dates when I wasn't even in the country. Pictures of passengers from flights I'd worked, people walking through terminals, some of them circled in red ink. I sat there, breathing shallowly, staring at the laptop. The screen was locked with a password, but the wallpaper image was visible, a scanned ID card of one of the missing passengers Zara had told me about. My first instinct was to take everything, the drives, the photos, and run. But before I could touch anything, I heard it. Footsteps upstairs. I froze. It couldn't be Rayan. He'd left less than half an hour ago. I hadn't heard the car come back, but someone was definitely up there. Slow, measured steps moving across the living room floor, then silence. I turned off the light, pressed myself against the wall, and waited. A minute later, the basement door creaked open. I could hear the hinges whine, and then nothing, just breathing. Someone was standing at the top of the stairs. Alina? Rayan's voice, calm, too calm. I didn't answer. I watched the faint beam of his phone's flashlight sweep across the room, closer and closer to the curtain. He was checking. He knew. I slid quietly toward the side wall and ducked behind a stack of boxes. The floor vibrated as his footsteps came down, one at a time. I could hear his breathing now, slow and deliberate. He stopped near the curtain. I held my breath, waiting for him to pull it back, but he didn't. After a few seconds, I heard him mutter something, too low to catch, and then the light disappeared. The footsteps retreated. The door closed again. I stayed hidden for at least 5 more minutes before daring to move. When I finally climbed the stairs, my legs were trembling. I locked my bedroom door behind me and sat there in the dark, shaking, my heart beating so hard it hurt. By morning, the false wall was gone. The curtain had been taken down, the tools cleared, the space empty, as if nothing had ever been there. He didn't mention it, and neither did I. But from that day on, he watched me differently, as if waiting for me to make a mistake. I started planning to leave, quietly, carefully, but part of me couldn't walk away without understanding what he was doing. I had stumbled into something criminal, maybe even deadly, and if I left without answers, I'd never sleep again. That night, I sent Zara the photo of the passenger ID I'd seen on the laptop wallpaper. Within an hour, she called back, whispering urgently, "Alina, that guy's case was linked to smuggling. The investigation went cold because they couldn't trace where the last cargo went." Or a cargo. The word hit me like a punch. My flights, Rayan's projects, the hidden room, the surveillance photos, it all began to make a sick kind of sense. My stepbrother wasn't just acting strange. He was working with someone, maybe several people, using airline routes, maybe even my access to move something or someone. And I had just found his secret room. The next few days were a blur of tension. I barely spoke to Rayan. We moved around the same house like two ghosts, pretending everything was normal, while both of us knew it wasn't. He started locking his door again, and I noticed he kept his laptop with him constantly, even taking it to the bathroom. But it wasn't his silence that haunted me. It was the face of that missing passenger. The one I'd seen on his laptop wallpaper. I couldn't forget it. A middle-aged man, slightly balding, with kind eyes. He had asked me for a second blanket on that September flight. I remembered him thanking me, smiling tiredly before closing his eyes. His name, according to Zara, was David Rains. He was traveling alone from Istanbul to London, but he never arrived at his connecting destination. Now, that same man's ID had been sitting on my stepbrother's laptop. I tried convincing myself it was a coincidence, but the deeper I dug, the less sense it made. I started researching David Rains online, old news articles, forums, and Reddit threads. His disappearance had been briefly covered by international outlets, then buried under other headlines. According to reports, his luggage was never recovered, and there was no trace of him after the flight landed. 2 days later, I received an anonymous message on my phone. "You were on flight 7A3. We need to talk." There was no name, no number, just the message. I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam, until another came seconds later. "You're not safe in that house. He's involved." My chest tightened. I looked at the ceiling, at the faint sound of footsteps in the room above. Rayan was home. My hands shook as I turned off my phone and pretended nothing had happened. That night, I met Zara at a cafe near the airport, away from home. I told her everything, the flash drive, the photos, the secret room, and the name of the missing passenger. She stared at me in disbelief, then said, "You realize this could get you killed, right?" I laughed weakly, but she wasn't joking. "Alina, whatever he's doing, it's not small time. If that passenger was part of a smuggling case and your stepbrother has his ID, he's in deep. Maybe both of you are." That last line stuck in my head. On my way home, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following me. Every time I turned around, I caught the flash of headlights, but the car kept its distance. It followed me for 10 minutes before finally turning off. By the time I reached the driveway, My nerves were raw. The house was dark, but the faint glow from under Rayan's door told me he was awake. I tiptoed past and locked myself in my room. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. He's part of it. Don't trust him. Look in the vent behind the basement fridge. I stared at the message, feeling my heartbeat echo in my throat. Who was sending these? How did they know about the basement? I waited until morning, pretending to leave for errands, then slipped back inside after Rayan's car disappeared. The basement felt colder than usual, the air damp and heavy. Behind the old fridge, I found the vent, loose at the corner. When I unscrewed it, a small black pouch slid out. Inside were passports, at least 6 of them. Different names, different faces. But one of them made my blood run cold. It was mine. Not my real one, a fake, with my photo and a different name, Lena Arendt. I sat down hard, the pouch still open in my lap. My hands were trembling too much to process it. Why would he have fake documents with my face? What was he planning? I went through the other passports. Some belonged to people who looked vaguely familiar, passengers I'd seen before, maybe even served during flights. All missing, all unaccounted for. Suddenly, I heard a noise upstairs. The front door opened. Footsteps, heavier than usual. I froze. He was back early. I shoved the pouch back into the vent, trying not to make a sound. My heart was racing so hard it made me dizzy. Then, a voice. Not Rayan's, a man's. Deep, calm, unfamiliar. I couldn't hear what they were saying, only fragments. Package, delays, departure tonight, departure. I slipped quietly to the bottom of the stairs, crouching low. From where I stood, I could see the hallway, Rayan handing over an envelope to a man in a black jacket. The man opened it, nodded once, and said, "It's handled. She won't be a problem." She. My blood turned to ice. I backed away slowly, careful not to creak a step. My phone was still in my pocket, and I started recording, just in case. The man left after a few minutes. Rayan locked the door, then leaned his head against it for a moment, breathing heavily. Then he turned and looked directly at the stairs. Our eyes met. I didn't move, neither did he. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. Then he said quietly, "You weren't supposed to find any of this." I ran. Out the back door, across the yard, into the street. I didn't even grab my bag. I kept running until I reached the main road, flagged down a passing taxi, and told the driver to go anywhere. Just drive. I stayed with Zara that night, shaking, barely able to speak. She called one of her friends who worked in airport security. They promised to connect me with a contact in law enforcement, but they warned me to stay hidden. Before dawn, another message appeared on my phone. "We tried to help you. He knows where you are." From that moment on, I realized it wasn't just about Rayan anymore. Whatever he was involved in had eyes everywhere, people watching me, tracking me. The missing passenger wasn't the only victim. And the fake passport with my face meant only one thing. I was next on the list. By the time morning light crept through Zara's curtains, I hadn't slept a minute. My body was still in fight or flight mode, ears tuned to every sound from outside. Zara made coffee, trying to calm me down, but even the smell made my stomach turn. I felt hunted, not just by Rayan, but by whoever he was working with. I checked my phone again. No new messages, but I noticed something worse. A tiny green dot blinking beside the camera icon. The realization hit like a slap. My phone had been hacked. Someone was watching me through it. I threw it into Zara's sink and ran cold water over it until it shorted out. She stared, speechless. "Alina, what are you doing?" "They're tracking me," I said, shaking. "They know where I am." We packed a small bag and left her apartment within minutes. We drove aimlessly, taking back streets, avoiding the main roads. Every black SUV felt like a threat. Every turn of the rearview mirror made my pulse jump. By noon, we reached a small motel near the edge of town. Zara paid in cash and used a fake name. We stayed in a room that smelled of dust and old cigarettes, curtains drawn tight. For the first time in hours, there was silence. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. "He set me up," I whispered. "Those passports, the fake one with my picture. He was going to make me disappear like the others." Zara didn't argue. She'd seen the look on my face when I told her about the vent, the documents, the voice that said she won't be a problem. We decided to go to the police, but I needed proof. Something solid. The video I'd recorded when that man came to the house might be enough. The problem was, it was still on my old phone. And my laptop, which had a copy of the flash drive, was back in that house. That's when Zara made the mistake of suggesting we go back for it. "We'll be quick," she said. "Grab the laptop, get out. I'll wait in the car." It was a terrible idea, and I agreed anyway. We waited until nightfall. The street outside my house was quiet, but I noticed a new black car parked 2 houses down. No lights, no movement. Still, I forced myself forward. I crept through the backyard, using the side gate we'd used as kids. The key still fit. The kitchen was dark, the air stale. I moved silently through the hallway toward my room. Everything looked untouched, except for one thing. The light under Rayan's door was on. I froze. Was he here? Or had he left it that way on purpose? I went straight to my room. The laptop wasn't where I left it. My drawers were open, my clothes tossed around. He'd searched everything. My heartbeat was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. Then a sound, a soft click behind me. The door closed. Rayan was standing there, calm as ever, holding something in his hand. Not a weapon, just his phone. He smiled faintly. "You shouldn't have come back." "Where is it?" I asked. "My laptop, the drive, where did you put them?" He tilted his head slightly, almost amused. "Gone. You really thought you could play detective, didn't you?" I stepped back, my hand trembling on the doorknob. "You're working with them, aren't you? The people who make those passports. What did you do to that passenger?" His expression darkened. "You talk too much, Alina. You've always been curious. That's your problem." I tried to bolt, but he blocked the door. His voice dropped to a whisper. "They wanted to use you. Your access, your roots, your uniform. You were perfect, friendly, trusted, invisible. But now," he sighed, "now you've made it complicated." My mind raced. I needed a way out. My eyes flicked to the window behind him, slightly open. If I could get there, maybe. He noticed. "Don't," he said. And then his phone buzzed. A message popped up on the screen, bright in the dark room. I caught a glimpse of it before he turned it away. "Package confirmed. Handle her tonight." That was all I needed. I shoved him with all my strength, knocking him off balance, and sprinted past him into the hallway. He shouted my name, his footsteps pounding behind me. I ran toward the back door, fumbled with the lock, and burst into the yard. Zara's car headlights flashed once in the distance. She'd seen me. I waved frantically. Then a gunshot cracked through the night. The sound froze everything. I hit the ground instinctively, dirt scraping my palms. Another shot followed, hitting the wall inches above me. "Alina!" Zara's scream cut through the chaos. I crawled behind the garden shed, heart hammering so loud it felt like it would explode. I heard Rayan shouting into his phone, angry, desperate. "She's running! No, she knows everything!" I took my chance, sprinted across the yard, and dove into the passenger seat. Zara hit the gas before the door was even fully closed. We didn't stop until we were miles away, the city lights shrinking in the rearview mirror. I was shaking so hard I couldn't speak. Blood trickled from a small cut on my arm, but I barely noticed. Zara pulled over under a bridge, turned off the headlights, and looked at me. "He tried to kill you," she said quietly. I nodded. Not just me. They were going to make it look like I vanished. Another missing passenger. We sat in silence for a long time. Then, for the first time since it all began, I made a decision that felt final. "I'm done running," I said. "Tomorrow, I go to the authorities. Not the local police, the ones handling the smuggling cases. I'll give them everything." Zara hesitated. "He'll find you. Then I'll make sure he can't." That night, we slept in shifts. I kept replaying every word he'd said. "You were perfect. You were trusted. It made sense now." My access as a flight attendant, my routine travel routes. He'd been using me as a cover. I had no idea how deep it went, but one thing was certain. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was the bait. I didn't go home again after that night. The thought of stepping back into that house made my stomach twist. Zara and I checked into another motel near the airport, a cheap one with peeling wallpaper and flickering lights, but at least it was anonymous. I spent the morning gathering everything I could remember. Flight numbers, passenger details, delivery dates, and even the brands of the boxes I'd seen in the basement. I didn't have physical proof anymore, but I had my memory, and I had the one thing Rayan couldn't erase. the recording on my phone before it was hacked. Zara's friend from airport security helped recover the file from the device's cloud backup. When we played it, my blood went cold. The recording caught Rayan's voice clearly. It's handled. She won't be a problem. That single line was enough to prove intent. It wasn't much, but it was something. We contacted the authorities the next day, not local police, but the Federal Aviation Investigation Bureau, the department that handled crimes related to air travel and smuggling. An officer named Detective Farouk took our case seriously from the start. He listened to my story without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he said quietly, "You're describing an organized network. We've been tracking similar operations across multiple airlines. They use staff, baggage handlers, technicians, and even flight attendants to move high-value contraband. Human smuggling too sometimes, people who vanish after arrival." "Like the missing passengers," I said. He nodded. "Exactly." I gave him everything I knew about Rayan, his routines, the visitors, the secret room, and the fake passports. He told us to stay somewhere safe while his team looked into it. They arranged protection, but I still felt exposed. Every shadow outside the motel window looked like danger waiting. 2 days later, Detective Farouk called. "We found something," he said. "You need to come in." When I arrived, they showed me photos taken during a raid on a warehouse near the industrial docks. Inside were hundreds of fake IDs, luggage tags, and several airline uniforms, including one with my name embroidered on the tag. Rayan's name appeared on the shipping logs linked to that facility. My throat tightened as Farouk spoke. "Your stepbrother wasn't just a middleman, he was one of the coordinators. His group used flight attendants like you without their knowledge, smuggling packages through luggage routes, hiding data chips inside travel kits, and occasionally using fake identities to move people across borders. That's where the missing passengers come in. They were either victims or accomplices who knew too much." I sank into the chair. "And me?" He hesitated before answering. "You were next. They planned to stage your disappearance. Your fake passport was already printed." The room tilted for a second. I couldn't breathe. Everything I'd ignored, every uneasy feeling, had been leading to this. Farouk continued. "Your brother's been on the run since last night, but we believe he's still in the city. He might try to contact you or lure you out. I promised to stay away from my phone and remain in police protection. But that night, while sitting in the safe house, I received a handwritten note slipped under the door. 'Meet me at dock 14 at midnight. You deserve the truth.' It wasn't signed, but I didn't need it to be. The handwriting was his. I should have told Farouk. I should have stayed inside. But fear and anger can make you reckless. I needed to see him, to understand why he'd done it and how far it went. So I went. The docks were silent, the air heavy with salt and diesel. Containers lined both sides of the narrow path, towering like walls. My footsteps echoed in the emptiness. When I reached dock 14, I saw him standing under a broken floodlight, his shadow stretched long across the ground. Rayan looked different, unshaven, eyes hollow, clothes wrinkled. He smiled faintly when he saw me. "You shouldn't have come," he said. "You made me," I replied. "You dragged me into this." He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "You think I wanted this? I tried to protect you, Alina. They wanted to use you from the start. I said no. That's why they turned on me." "Protect me?" I laughed bitterly. "By locking me in your house? By building a secret room full of fake IDs and photos of people who vanished?" He didn't answer. Instead, he handed me a small flash drive identical to the one I'd found in my drawer weeks ago. "This has everything," he said. "Names, shipments, account transfers. Give it to the authorities. Tell them it wasn't just me. It goes higher, people in the airline, customs, even security." I stared at him. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because they're already watching, and because you're the only one they won't suspect." A sharp noise cut through the air, footsteps behind the containers. Rayan's eyes widened. "Go," he whispered. "Now." Before I could react, a figure appeared from the shadows, gun raised. A single shot rang out, and Rayan collapsed. I screamed, dropping beside him. He was bleeding, gasping for air. "Run," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Don't let them." His hand slipped from mine. I ran. Headlights blazed behind me as more footsteps thundered across the dock. I darted between containers, clutching the flash drive. Somehow, I reached the main road and flagged down a passing truck. The driver didn't ask questions, just saw my face and opened the door. By morning, I was back at the bureau, flash drive in hand, shaking as I handed it to Detective Farouk. Within hours, the information on it led to multiple arrests, airline officials, cargo inspectors, and even a few government officers. The network Rayan had worked for was finally exposed. They never found the shooter. Weeks later, I stood at the edge of the pier where Rayan died. The sea was calm, almost peaceful. I wanted to hate him, but I couldn't. Somewhere under all his lies, he'd still tried, in his broken way, to save me at the end. I returned to flying after 3 months. The first time I walked down the aisle of a plane again, my hands trembled. Every passenger's face reminded me of the ones who disappeared. But I kept walking, because stopping would mean they'd won. I still keep the photo of Rayan, the one from years ago before everything went wrong, tucked in my passport holder. Not out of love or forgiveness, but as a reminder of how close I came to vanishing too. And how sometimes the real danger isn't up in the sky, it's waiting for you back home. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rebuild the pieces of my life, but nothing felt the same. The apartment I rented near the airport was small and quiet, but at least it was mine. The silence used to scare me. Now I find comfort in it. The investigation stretched on for months. The flash drive Rayan gave me turned out to be a map of something much bigger. Coded bank transfers, altered cargo manifests, and private correspondence between airline executives and international smugglers. What started as one man's secret led to a nationwide crackdown. Dozens were arrested, others vanished before they could be caught. The authorities called me a key witness. The media called me the air hostess who exposed the ring. But none of their headlines mentioned the truth, that I'd been one step away from being erased myself. That my stepbrother, for all his crimes, had died trying to make it right. Sometimes, when I'm back on duty, I still think about him. When the engines roar before takeoff, I remember how I used to look out the cabin window as a child, waving goodbye to him at the gate. We were never real siblings by blood, but we shared a home, and for a while we shared trust, until greed turned him into someone else. One night, after a late international flight, I landed in Karachi. As I stepped off the jet bridge, a cold gust brushed past my neck, the same kind I'd felt the night at the docks. For a second, it felt like someone was there, watching. But when I turned, there was only the hum of the terminal and the distant echo of announcements. I've learned that ghosts don't always come from the dead. Sometimes they live inside you, made of guilt, of memories, of things left unsaid. I still fly. I still smile at passengers. But now I notice everything, every unclaimed suitcase, every unfamiliar face in the crew lounge, every delay that doesn't make sense. Because once you've seen how deep corruption can hide beneath something as ordinary as a flight schedule, you can never unsee it. People think the sky is dangerous, but I know better. The real turbulence begins when the plane lands.